Please join us in welcoming CEO of Sun Country Airlines, Jude Bricker, in conversation with founder and editor of the Airline Observer, Brian Summers.
That's me.
All right.
Hi, Jude.
Hello, Brian.
Good to see you again.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so we did a prep call for this, and after the prep call, someone at Becca, who works for Skift, said, does not want to talk about Frontier Airlines. So let's talk about Frontier,
So, yeah, all right, let's
talk about
it.
Frontier.
I feel like we should say something controversial to all the people that stayed to the end of the day.
I think that we should. So Frontier had an earnings call last week. And, you know, Barry Biffle, the CEO of Frontier, basically said, okay, so our earnings were absolutely horrible. But the thing is, we're in bad markets. And a market like Minneapolis, which he name dropped, which is where you are based, they're doing pretty well because they just don't have a lot of capacity up there.
It's a great market. I agree with him.
Yeah?
Awesome, yeah.
But are you guys only succeeding because it happens to be a great market without too much competitive capacity? Or is there something that you're actually doing here?
No, I mean, I haven't even been to work in a couple months. I think we're doing pretty good. I don't know. All right, here's my thing. I think, so we're seeing generally unit revenues increase month over month for every month of the year versus 2019 comps by about the same, 35 to 40% unit revenue improvements, peak off peak. Everything's about that much better. And that's, I think, a really positive revenue environment. The issue is that all the costs in the industry are up, you know, I don't know, call it $0.015 on a ex-fuel CASM basis. And so when you're in a trough and the yields increase by 35%, that 35% is consumed entirely by the cost increases that you've had. In the peak periods, it's doing really well. So I think, you know, a lot of what's differentiating airlines today, Andrew was talking a little bit about this, is how they deal with off-peak periods. And I think there's kind of three ways to go about it. You either focus on business customers, you discount airfares to stimulate traffic, or you eliminate that flying. We eliminate the flying. Bob Jordan was up here talking about variations on the schedule. I think he mentioned 6 to 8%. My September schedule is 70% less than my July schedule. And, you know, I think that variable capacity allocation model is working pretty well, as you know, some verifiable data would be that Sun Country delivered the highest pre-tax margin for the 12 months ending in the second quarter, highest pre-tax margin in 20 and 21 when the industry was in crisis. So I don't know, I think things are going pretty good.
So when you see these other airlines just dump capacity into Las Vegas, Orlando, other places in Florida, you say this is nuts?
I do say this is nuts. When I see really low fares, I think that airlines should eliminate that flying as opposed to just discounting into that, because, you know, you're not necessarily building. The justification for leaving it in there would be you're either servicing your fixed costs, which I think is a structural problem, or you're building a brand of low fare and awareness of your product, which helps future sales. I think that that's proven itself not to be a really viable strategy. So to me, like, the best thing is just to reallocate capacity. So in that way, I like what Barry was saying, and let's go take some of the capacity out of these overcapacity markets. I think, and
take them to places like your hub
like
in Minneapolis.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we have 100 markets out of Minneapolis, and we have overlap with them, I think, on 4 now. So yeah, I mean, I think Minneapolis is a great market. The challenge with Minneapolis has always been the challenge with Minneapolis, is that the leisure market is just super seasonal. So you have to have a purpose-built airline to serve the market successfully, and we fly a different schedule every day of the year. We have this really domestic, big market focused summer schedule. We just did a big market announcement, continuing to connect Minneapolis to markets that can sustain at least twice a week service. And then in the wintertime, we fly to warm, sunny destinations, as you'd imagine the demand would be for those. And you know, but every day is different from every other day. We have these special holidays like MEA, which helps October. So, you know, I mean, I think you need to be purpose-built for the market, and most importantly, you can't have a dependency to sort of do, you know, fixed fee servicing on your flying, because I think that's what's been called into question with the results from Spirit and Frontier.
And this idea that, Frontier said they're at 11 hours a day of utilization. You told me, I think you're in the 7-hour range.
We're proud of how low we fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that if you can deliver low unit costs at low utilization, I think that, look, I mean, there's a couple reasons to invest in airlines. One is you're restructuring. There are probably
no reasons.
No, there are. If you're restructuring, that the investors have done pretty well. You're seeking out high beta, betting on the economy. Or you're buying an airline that can do something no one else can do. That's our thing. Like we can deliver low unit costs and low fare, and therefore, at a low utilization, so we can fly when we want and not have these dependencies. And that's why we're successful during COVID, and also in a high fare environment like we're in today, high fuel, low fuel, whatever.
All right. In the low fare environment, in the ultra low cost environment, you have Avelo.
Yeah.
You have, arguably, you have Breeze, you have Spirit.
Yeah.
You have Frontier. I know Spirit is sort of in M&A now, but who knows how that's going to go. Do we need to see some consolidation in your area of the market? I'm
pro consolidation generally, so I don't know. All the airlines you mentioned don't have any overlap with my business, so there's not a whole lot. We're not going to be, I wouldn't imagine, a player, but there's a lot of overlap between Spirit and Frontier. I think that would make sense, and they were obviously in the later stages of talking about merging. So yeah, I mean, I think there's probably, I think I'm in agreement broadly with the commentary that you point out Frontier's call, where there's too much capacity on these off-peak periods to these leisure markets. Yes, that's true, and I think, some rationalization through consolidation probably would help. But yeah, I mean, it's not my strategy. Now, you're understandably so. You're being a little bit diplomatic here on our prep call. Thank you for pointing that out. You did call Sun Country, I think, a quote plug and play end quote opportunity for another carrier that might want to buy you. You have one hub in Minneapolis. We were talking in context that even I can't screw it up. Yeah. It's just, it's a business that's running really well. But you might mesh pretty well with another carrier. I think the point is we have the highest margins. We're small enough that, you're talking in hypotheticals and I'm sort of agreeing with you. So don't, I think anybody could come with me in thesis to say you should be bought by this company or that company. And I might say, okay, that sort of makes sense. But I think it's sort of largely irrelevant. We're just very different from everybody else, which is a core competency and strength, and it's also a challenge in the M&A space. All right. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I'll switch to a friendlier topic. One of the things that I like about Sun Country, and I flew all of you recently. Did you really? I did. You gave me free pretzels, and I really like the pretzels that you give me. But I bring that up, right? Because you are a ULCC, you love having ultra low cost, but you don't go nuts like some of the other carriers. So this is super interesting to me, because I kind of grew up in the industry as I was this sort of fanatical about it. And I was like, Michael O'Leary's my guy. People crawl through broken glass to get a lower fare, and and what my road to Damascus has kind of created a more nuanced view on that, where I think that the brand damage that you can get by sort of deliberate, even overcharging for ancillary products or whatever, bad operations, I think has lasting effects, and it's difficult to back out of, and that revenue discount that you realize in the marketplace, it often exceeds, I think, the savings that you'd get from small things. So at Sun Country, for example, we give away, as you point out, pretzels, but also non-alcoholic beverages on our flights, and it doesn't cost me that much, and I think it's just sort of helps us differentiate a little bit. We also give away free entertainment through a Wi-Fi connective on the airplane. We have these really nice seats that we spend a lot of money on. We have a premium economy product. So, I think that's the idea. Is again, it's kind of a purpose-built airline for the Minneapolis market. Our main comp is Delta, which has a really nice product, so I think we got to be a little bit better. And then it's also a long length of haul. I mean, we're geographically isolated, so our average stage length is over 3 hours. And I think, comfort trades at a higher premium the longer you fly. And so, you know, I think it's just kind of, everything's a little more nuanced. I think it's difficult to draw, you know, absolutes in this space. And so there are things that we do in our business that drive higher unit costs and higher profits at the same time. And I think as long as you can identify those things, then it's worth a little bit. And
pretzels lead to, indirectly must lead
pretzels,
to
the
premium?
pretzel thing, it's a bit of a diversion.
Yeah.
I would say not related to what we're talking about, but we serve Dots Pretzels. Dots is a local brand, you know, so this is again about being purpose-built. Dots Pretzels, Fulton Beer, we have, you know, our liquor and beer menu comes from local companies. It's that kind of thing.
All right. So you talk about the competition with Delta. It seems like every year I ask you this question. Every year you get just a little bit more aggressive. You had maybe a dozen new routes that you announced within the last couple of weeks from Minneapolis, Missoula,
I don't think
Billings,
we talked about
Boise.
this at our prep call.
I think we did, but it's neither here nor there. The routes are the routes.
It is public.
You know, have you seen any competitive response from them? You always tell me no. They kind of let you grow underneath them.
Oh, that's not true. They you know, we launch a market. They launched the same market. They weren't in Richmond. We went into Richmond. But we have nearly. I mean, I think I can only think of about 4 markets of the 98 to be precise, maybe 5 that we fly without direct competition from Delta. This is funny. Here's what I'd say. Like, Delta serves a different customer in the Twin Cities. We want Delta to be really successful in Minneapolis because it helps the community. It helps attract Fortune 500 companies to downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul. I want Minneapolis to always be a hub. And I think that's good for the community and good for business. You know, and I think from my perspective, I also want to be there for the people that pay with their own money and therefore pay what they pay for. And we're not pursuing corporate contracts with any of the Twin Cities businesses. So these are very different businesses. I think they're complementary. I think they do very well in Minneapolis. I do very well in Minneapolis. So, you know, I don't think about them that much when I'm making network decisions. I hope they don't think about me either.
So Delta has said on some of its earnings calls that 2023 was going to be the year that they were going to reinvest in their middle of the country hubs, including Minneapolis, Detroit. You seen any real changes from them in Minneapolis?
Well, they're growing, and they put quite a lot of capacity into the first quarter. Delta has a scheduling philosophy, as best I can tell. They add more, they load more schedule than they end up flying, and they cut down particularly high-frequency markets as sales matriculate, which I think makes a ton of sense. We're the opposite. We load a baseline schedule, and then as we see sales come through, we tend to add extra sections, you know, also exogenous things, as we talk about today, like pilots and stuff like that, and we see what attrition and hiring does. So, like, it's difficult for me to tell precisely, but you know, what I can tell, Delta is very rational. They're not into discounting. They're just a really rational competitor, which I think is good.
So most of your flying is passenger flying. A couple of years ago, you were the genius of conferences. Smartest guy in the room.
That lasted a little while.
You signed up Amazon for a 10-year contract hauling packages on 737s, right?
Yeah.
So it turns out, fast forward a couple years later, we're past COVID, and actually you make more money flying passengers. You ever wish you hadn't done that deal?
Well, that's what diversification's all about.
All right.
It's like you can't have, if one was always better than the other, we should just stop doing everything but that thing. So look, I mean, our September is better because we can cut down the scheduled service flying and focus therefore on the other stuff that's really flat, like our cargo business. We went into cargo before COVID for that specific reason. The strategic problem that Sun Country's always had is how do we make the peaks bigger without making the troughs worse? How do we take on more airplanes, add more staff, things like that? And cargo was a way to solve that, and so it's serving that purpose. We're committed to the business. The issue that we've had is we just haven't been able to peak back into the recovery as fast as we want. So I mentioned our margins being best in the industry. Another thing that we've done really good is we'll do about 50% more departures in 2023 than we did in 2019. I think that's best in the industry, but for the 2 startups that you call out. So, you know, I mean, like, but it just requires a tremendous amount of staff. So we added all these cargo airplanes through the pandemic. We went into the pandemic with 31 airplanes. Today we're at 65, counting our leased out fleet. So like we just, that's a lot of growth, and we haven't been able to staff into it as rapidly as we would have liked. But cargo is, from my perspective, here to stay, and it's serving its purpose of rebalancing the schedule into the trough periods. It's part of the secret sauce, man.
The secret sauce.
The secret sauce.
All right. I know we'll have to see how you do on stage in front of the audience here.
Okay.
But you have more outspoken opinions about pilots and this quote pilot shortage than the average person. You don't believe much in a pilot shortage.
No, I think the future looks a lot like the past. I think we're through the recovery, through the pandemic, we had a lot of early retirements. The network carriers all had to hire into the recovery, and they have a bump and flush system with multiple fleet types, and so that takes a long time. And they sort of went into the regional space and pulled a bunch of people forward, which we heard talked about up to stage today. And but like the flight schools are full. The job is a really good job and attractive. For which increasingly career.
You don't even need a college degree, right?
Well, that is.
I mean, you get paid a lot of money without.
Yeah, right. So pilots do very well, and I think that it's going to attract a lot of folks into the space, and so I think that that's going to work itself out. I am worried about sort of standardization of work rules. I think airlines need to be able to differentiate themselves. I'm worried about overall pay, like we're going to be able to service these contracts that I'm seeing coming through the industry through a downturn, but. I think that we're going to be able to, we're already able to hire all the pilots we need. Our issue is really about upgrades. And that is important because it's part of, in my view, a strength for us, because it's very easy to me to say, here's the difference between performance and potential. It's that in the third quarter, for example, we should be 20 or 30% bigger in July during peak periods, and that, that sort of summarizes how we get to our margin potential. And we're starting to chip away at that variance by, upgrading captains and bringing them, and bringing their replacements into the right seat as well. So, I think it's just taking a lot longer than I would have liked, certainly than my investors would have liked. But the opportunity remains, and I think to your point, I think what you said is, that I think that there's going to be sufficient pilots to support.
I've got to put you on the spot here.
Oh, here we go.
How much money did your top paid pilot make last year? This is a ULCC.
Yep.
And I know you know the answer because you told me already.
This is my top earning pilot, I should be clear. $750,000.
That's pretty remarkable.
I thought so. But that's why I think it's going to sort itself out. I mean, there's a lot of folks that, and by the way, I tell everybody that number, because I want people to be attracted to the space.
Yeah, probably like they've come here, they paid the money, they get the information. All right, we have an audience question here, and actually a pretty good one. Yeah. I think it's about the essential air service. Usually, when airlines apply for these routes, it's to connect people from a very small town to a hub so they can get to the rest of the world. Sun Country, as the question mentions, has a very unique strategy around this. Yeah. And the question is, can you share more about Sun Country's strategy around essential air service contracts?
I love
Why is it essential for people to go to Florida?
It's not for me to determine. So here's the requirement. You got to serve the market about 200 flights a year. A lot of these small markets have lost some service through the pullback in regional capacity, which is largely a result of the pilot hiring we already talked about. So, Eau Claire, which is in Wisconsin, about 90 minutes drive from my headquarters, lost their air service, and we went to them and said, hey, we'll do it. We fly Eau Claire to Minneapolis, Eau Claire to Vegas, and Eau Claire to Orlando, and I think by the definitions of EAS, which is a federal program, that we qualify as connecting that community to.
It's a nice little subsidy, right?
Yeah, it's great.
To take awesome. People from Wisconsin to Vegas.
It's great. Honestly, I think it's working out for the community, which is important. So the throughput on the airport is far more than anything they would get in a typical EAS program, which often involves I don't know, Brazilias or something like that, flying in and out, small airplanes. So yeah, I mean, I think it's working great, and I hope that I think they're very happy with it. There's 6 EAS markets in Minnesota. We're obviously going to be interested in those, and look, I'll do that all day long. I think it's great. I love it. And I think a lot of the protestations from other airlines are just jealous that they didn't think about it. So.
All right, let's finish here on your favorite topic. All airline executives are nerds, but you're all nerds in your own different ways. And you are an aircraft procurement and financing nerd. I joked recently that if there is a 737 used NG anywhere in the world, and it's a good deal, you're going to go find it and buy it, including those, 5 from Oman Air that you're waiting for?
Yeah, well, since we're in a nerd off, I like the pricing and network side a lot more. I think that's a super interesting space. But I do love I do love buying.
Are there
airplanes.
deals for aircraft
and my
right
fleet
now?
team, I'm always in their stuff, and I love it. So here's what we're seeing on the airplane side. All the problem that you heard about earlier today with the GTF and Boeing production issues is causing a real tightness in narrow bodies generally, and certainly in the 800s that I typically focus on, the 900s. But we're in a place that we have more. As I mentioned, our utilization is down versus pre-COVID levels, so we can grow through increased utilization. We also have, as Brian mentioned, 5 900s that are on lease to Oman Air, which we intend to take back beginning about 13 months from now. Which brings the fleet to 63. So we have as I mentioned, there's this identifiable and addressable variance between performance and potential. We're going to address that. And then also we have this growth that we're going to be able to execute in the next 2 years that doesn't require any supporting CapEx. It's a really rare situation for an airline to be in because we're just taking aircraft back on lease that are earning pretty good returns for us today. I think the 800 market is going to kind of go the way of all out of production airplanes. It's just a matter of time. We'll continue to be able to support ourselves. What's interesting to me is that an airplane's value in the used space is mostly transferable maintenance value, fungible maintenance value. So, when we're out there buying airplanes, you think about there's maintenance value, there's the bits that you can sell when you're done with it and tear down. And then there's an operator premium that you might have to pay. On a new airplane, that operator premium can be $14, $15 million. On a used airplane, it's sometimes zero, sometimes negative. And we're seeing, it go to $1 million, but it's still a ton of value. And so when I talk to Boeing about MAXes, I love the airplane. I think it'd be great, but the bid ask between what I think the plane's worth and what they think it's worth is, $15 million. It's just very difficult for me to, with the 800 market being what it is and the performance of that airplane and the reliability of that airplane, it's very difficult for me to think about a MAX today. I made the beginning of my career flying MD-80s. That airplane had a real steep fall off in reliability as it aged. I'm not seeing that from the NG. I think it can go for a really long time. We're in the fleet that works best for us, and I don't think that's going to be changing anytime soon.
Jude, thank you for that wonderfully nerdy answer. I appreciate it.
You had that ready to go.